David Grossman, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Thank you, Mahan. It is a beautiful day. So grateful to be here with you.
I can't wait to talk about your book, The Hard Work of Modern Leadership, 6 Differentiators of Exceptional Leaders. Before we get to that though, David, would love to know a little bit more about you. Whereabouts did you grow up and how did your upbringing help contribute to who you've become?
So I asked a lot of questions as a kid. I was that precocious child who wanted to know why and how come. I found out later in life I drove most adults crazy. And in fact, I remember my dad saying to me one day, Mahan, he said, David, enough questions already. Now that I have kids, by the way, I've realized that payback is hell. So, like you, Mahan, I have 2 beautiful girls. You are ahead of me there as far as ages. So, Avi is 16. She just got her learner's permit. She is in full on dress rehearsal for the high school musical, which is Rent. She is playing Maureen. And then Noah, who is 13, she's studying for her bat mitzvah right now. So that is in May. And she is in the middle school musical. She's in 7th grade, which is Shrek. Super fun musical. And she's one of the 3 little pigs, and they are joys. And I love that they ask questions. I have to say, Steve and we are wholly prepared in many cases to answer the questions that they ask us. So Steve, my husband, is a former attorney, now a middle school teacher. So we've got a child development
Wow.
expert in our household, which I have to say he reminds me of many times, although I have to remind him that you've got a communications and leadership coach in the house as well. So we have super interesting questions, but we're not prepared to answer some of the great questions our girls are asking. And I think that's okay. We try and create space for their questions and in many cases force them to answer questions too. So asking questions helped me as a journalist, so super early in my career. And then for the past 30 years or so, asking questions has helped me as I help extraordinary leaders work through times of extraordinary transformation and change. And all of that regularly makes me fascinated by a very simple question. Maybe it's not so simple today, but it is: what makes great leaders great?
What a beautiful question, David. I don't know if you've read any of Warren Berger's work, but he talks about the power of questions.
Mm,
And it is even more important now, as you might know, I have been fascinated for half a dozen years with the impact of AI. And on the podcast, I've had a lot of really insightful futurists and AI experts. And one of the things they also say is that the level and power of our questioning becomes the key differentiator. So that is a beautiful and powerful question. Now, one of the things I wonder, David, is that when you ask that question, what determines what is great leadership? In many instances, we have the Elon Musks of the world, people that have been superbly successful in setting up organizations. And some would say they've been very successful. They've become billionaires. So, what is a great leader in your view before we find out what makes great leaders?
yeah, I answered that question by looking at some data because I have my own perspective on my own experiences and seeing sort of the evolution of leadership over time. And I think there's some basics that remain the same, but as we look at the leadership research we just did with the Harris poll, so I wanted to understand, what does exceptional leadership look like today? So I thought, let's go to who knows better than anyone else, employees today. So we surveyed 2,200 employed Americans and we asked them, tell us about your leader, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And what most surprised me was not one statistic, but it was a pattern that emerged as they talked about their own experience. And it reminded me of something that happened in my house a couple months ago. So we had a slow leak in our basement, not a burst pipe, not water gushing, a small, quiet leak happening behind the wall. So we go down to the basement regularly, and we have been. Everything's fine, everything's working. We had no idea. By the time we found it, the water had been running for a few months. And so we had issues with the framing and the drywall, and unfortunately there was mold behind the walls. So what should have been super easy fix turned into a major repair for us. Not because the leak was catastrophic, but because the leak was invisible and no one thought to look. And that's what we found in the data. So when we asked employees, here's what they told us. 30% of leaders, exceptional. They are meeting the moment. The other end of the spectrum, 16% of leaders, outdated. They've got an old playbook, right? They are causing burnout and disengagement. And then, so what does that leave? It leaves about 54% of leaders who are good. That's the biggest group, according to employees. So any leadership team would look at that data and say, 54% good, fantastic, next. However, when you asked employees, what does it feel like working for good leaders? Here's where the leak showed up. So only 16% feel that what's important to them as a person is valued. Second, only 19% feel heard under good leadership. And the third is only 14% feel like they're reaching their full potential. So therein, that's the water behind the walls. Nobody's complaining the house looks fine. The framing is warping. But here's the part that I think should concern every leader listening today. Good leadership paired with the kind of uncertainty that we're facing today doesn't produce a crisis anyone can point to. It produces anxiety, complacency, and drift. This slow erosion that's happening inside organizations. The danger, where I'm going with this, the danger isn't the bad leaders. We know who they are. The danger is the good ones, and no one today is looking there.
What an outstanding way to think about it. First of all, I love the fact that your book is based on a lot of research and data. It's not just David's thoughts and perspectives, which can be of value, but it's real research and data that you have done with the Harris poll. And that is outstanding in and of itself. But I love the framing that good is not good enough. But vast majority of leaders I interact with don't think they are good. So if I ask them to rate themselves, they would say, I am part of that grouping on top. What has been your experience and what does the data show, not just with respect to what the employees think of their leadership,
Yep.
but the self-perspective of those leaders?
So much data out there on so many topics where leaders overestimate how they're doing. So for example, when it comes to like well-being and burnout, we asked leaders in a different Harris poll survey, what percentage of your employees would say are thriving? And so leaders said, oh gosh, 89%. You asked employees, like, what percent of you are thriving? It's 24%. It's the same across the board on so many topics. We overestimate our ability, and therein lies the challenge that we've got to be able to get past. Being able to look in the mirror and say, I do some things well, and there are some opportunities that I have to be even better. And I think what's so cool about the data too is it tells us there are some things that good leaders are doing that we should keep doing. And as folks are listening to this, I wonder if it's helpful to just go through some of those dimensions so folks can say to themselves, am I doing this? So here's the good in what good leaders get right. So there are two things. One is employees tell us they feel valued and appreciated, meaning leaders notice when people deliver, they recognize their contributions, they say thank you. One thing. The second is employees feel supported. So leaders are reducing barriers, they are answering questions, they're providing direction. Good. Those are both head skills. Leaders, keep doing that. But that's not enough today. That's what's needed for stable times, right? People can operate on autopilot, but in uncertain times, people aren't just asking what's happening. Here's what employees are asking. They're asking, do I belong here? They're asking, will I be okay in all of this uncertainty? They're asking, am I reaching my full potential? They're asking, is my discretionary effort worth it? And those questions are not about information. Those questions are about the emotional reality. And many of us, most of us that sort of have grown up and learned leadership recently, we're built for stable times. We learned the head skills. We didn't really learn the heart skills. We can deal with facts and plans and processes, but in these uncertain times, that isn't enough.
So it requires for us to go deeper than some of what you mentioned. It being good in terms of showing appreciation, in terms of how we communicate, all of those things are important. However, that's not enough when people are facing such tremendous anxiety as a result of the uncertainty that we are going through. One of the things I wonder about, David, before we go deeper into this, is that in many instances, the leaders say, I am facing this myself as well. So there is a challenge where they feel destabilized and they feel that they are going through this uncertainty and don't know where things are headed. And that saps them of the energy and of the capability to do what you're talking about. What advice would you have for them in that respect?
Yeah, excellent point. That's all about putting on your own oxygen mask before you can help other people. And as you said so eloquently, we leaders are living through the same thing our people are living through. So we have to take care of ourselves first and deal with our own fight or flight that's happening inside of us, our own fear, because of course we make the weather for our people, but we've got to make good weather for ourselves first. So I often think about a three-step process. One is to first flag that you're having some kind of response here. Something's happening in your head. You're having a response to something that's happened. Man, I just heard a rumor we may be having budget cuts. That really stinks. So you've got to flag that there's a potential issue or you're starting to be thinking about something, want to name it and label it. Second, then, we want to feel it. So this is super complicated, but really important because sometimes when we're feeling things, what do we want to do? We want to swat it away. We want to push it down. And what happens? I learned this very well as a young leader. Those feelings come right back up at the most unopportune times, and you say things you regret. So you need to feel your feelings, but you can't go down that rabbit hole where you're like, oh, what if? What if there are more budget cuts? What if I lose my team? What if I get, that's that amygdala hijack where people get stuck and you're obsessing. You don't want to be there. So you need to feel what you're feeling and also own those emotions. So lots of times people will say to me when it comes to emotions, they're like, oh, David, let it go. You can't let go what you haven't owned and said, this is mine. So what I do literally, there are times where like I'll cup my hands and I'll say, this sucks. I'll try to put the feeling, the thoughts, the emotions like in my hands and say, this is my reality. I'm going to own it. I don't like it. It stinks. But then it doesn't control me as a leader. Now, if you do get stuck, and I'm going on because this is super complex, but really important. So, two things you can do if you get stuck in this emotional state. One is simply take a breath. Taking a breath, a natural breath, helps you reset your nervous system. And it tells your body, there's not a lion there. I'm safe. That's one thing that you can do. The second thing you can do, and surgeons do this in surgery, is they start talking out loud. They may say, I'm super worried about this. This really stinks. That helps them as well just by articulating what they're feeling. It helps them get back into flow. So you're processing your emotions. You're not going down the rabbit hole. You're trying to just own them and accept them and have them be what is. So flag it, feel it, and then face it. Then you're ready to act, right? Hopefully by then your prefrontal cortex is back on, right? So, the amygdala, I think about it like the smoke detector. It's like it's looking for threats. The prefrontal cortex, that's your Wi-Fi signal. So if you take care of your amygdala, your Wi-Fi signal is going to go back on. And that's when then you can decide, here's an action I can take, a small step forward. Like I can start to plan for what maybe could be cut from my budget. So flag it, feel it, face it. Just some 3 steps to start to think about how do we deal with our own emotions before we then are able to help others.
What a beautiful way and model of approaching it, David, which I find is so critical because in many of the instances, when I see leaders not following through with the habits and practices that you also talk about in your book, whether it's with respect to the gratitude gap or other elements, is that they have internal issues and challenges like this that they haven't faced up and owned up to themselves.
Mhm.
And what you shared is a beautiful way of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing I would add is fear kills speed, and safety unlocks genius. So there's biology that we have to understand and work with to solve this problem. And it's in our best interest as leaders because our ability to deal with the uncertainty, to deal with that fear, unlocks the prefrontal cortex of our teams. And that's where they're better able to plan and problem solve. And you mentioned gratitude a couple times. Gratitude is the number one differentiator that we found between exceptional leaders and everybody else. 54%. And as I just think about the listeners today, if there's only one thing you do coming out of this podcast today, have it be around gratitude. And what's super cool about gratitude is that it short circuits that survival brain. All of what we talked about short circuits that amygdala hijack, right? Oxytocin is released. That sort of, it's often called the trust hormone, and that makes us feel great and feel connected. And that is one antidote to all of the stress and uncertainty.
That's a great challenge you're throwing down for listeners. And I would double up on that, David. For decades, I've asked audiences at times when it's been relevant, how many people here feel as managers, executives, leaders that they show enough gratitude appreciation for the people who report to them. And pretty much almost everyone in the audience raises their hands. And when I say how many feel that your manager, your leader is showing enough gratitude to you,
Right.
it's incredible. There are only a couple of hands typically that go up. There is a stark contrast with respect to how much and how well we think we are doing it, and how much and how well the recipients feel we're doing it. So you're throwing down a beautiful challenge for the audience. If you think you're doing it outstanding, do more of it, do it better, because it's quite possible that the recipients don't feel that you're doing as much or as often as you should.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a wonderful case study from Campbell's Soup. So the year was 2001. I think Campbell's was in crisis. Like many companies today, new CEO, in comes Doug Conant. Instead of cracking the whip, what does he do? He picks up a pen. Every day on his commute, he writes 6 to 10 thank you notes to folks. Could be the CFO, could be a new hire, could be someone in his manufacturing plant. And he doesn't just say good job. He thanks them for what specifically they've done, which reflects that the person that they are. So it's more than just the contribution. And 10 years later, he's probably written some 30,000 notes. Their engagement scores go from the worst that Gallup's seen to the best. And of course, they outperform the S&P 500 by 50%. But I think what's probably most important, if I go in my file drawer today, I have a file, and in it are handwritten notes and printed out emails and a post-it note that says, "You are my hero, David." This is from decades of notes. I know the people that wrote those notes had no idea the significant impact that those notes were going to have on me that I still have today. And I'm having a bad day. There are times I got to pull that out. You know, I have to pull it out. And so the benefits are so significant, and not just to the receiver, but the benefits to the person writing the note, to sending that very personal, specific note that says, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for being you and what you did.
So, David, one of the things I wonder is why don't we do that? Why, with all the leadership development and all the books, your book is outstanding. There have been others that have said, at least with respect to gratitude, some of the same things. Why is it that the needle, if you look at the data, really hasn't shifted that much? Whether you look at the Gallup engagement survey or other data, employees don't feel that things have changed that much for them with respect to leadership. And literally 50 plus $billion a year is spent on leadership development. All of these books, all of these insights saying the same thing. Why haven't we moved the needle on that?
Yeah, I don't think we've invested in it in the right way. I think we need to start thinking about this not as leadership development, but as risk management. Why aren't these human skills, and we should talk about AI and human skills and all of that, why aren't they as important as cybersecurity or compliance? Every year we ask employees to do training on certain things. Why is it not also focused on these heart-focused skills that are going to make a significant difference? And I'm hoping to get the word out. Let's start a movement here of thinking differently about these skills. And there's more data here too, Mahan, around what the gaps are. Like, what's dripping behind that wall? We know it's dripping. Let's start to deal with it. So if you remember the Google study that they did probably in the early 200s, they would admit they were trying to get rid of managers. And so because their belief was managers were the problem, the people we should be investing in had the technical skills. But when they did the research on teams, what they found out is the most effective managers had content people, the best engagement, and the best retention, if you will. And the markers of that great manager, 9 out of 10, were heart focused. So when you look at our data, when you look at the top 10 skills of an exceptional leader, 9 out of 10 are heart focused. The last 10 is transparency. So different decade, different methodology, same results. We haven't invested in it, and we need to in a very different way.
You were mentioning that this also connects to organizational performance, and I want to underline that research links empathetic senior leaders directly to employee innovation. So when we talk about AI and the transformations organizations need to go through now, there is a need for that innovation. So in what ways does this empathy lead to greater innovation, David?
How do we innovate without diverse perspectives at the table? Which means we have to have an environment of safety where people feel okay to speak up. And not just that if we want innovation, not just that they feel okay to speak up, that we need them to speak up. We need diverse perspectives and different kinds of ideas. And that's not necessarily what we're seeing today. So as I think about the three gaps in the research here, so that separate the good leaders from exceptional leaders, and I think this is the drip behind the wall, Mahan. The first is, I feel what's important to me is valued. So we talked earlier about good leaders recognize the contribution, what you do. The fact of me feeling valued, that's who I am as a person. Because I'm asking the question today in all of this uncertainty, do I still belong here? This is about identity. This is about connection. Good leaders built for stable times are not thinking about these things. And that's where, so I'm a big musical theater fan. We love musical theater in our family. So every great musical, early on, the hero comes out and they sing what's called an I want song. That's all about their hopes and dreams. So Ariel, the little mermaid, of course, wants a different world. Or Elphaba from Wicked, she wants to be known for who she really is on the inside. Or Hamilton, he just wants his shot. So everybody has a song and everybody has a story. And the question for us as leaders is, and this ties to empathy, do we know our people's stories, their hopes and dreams, where they're going, how they want to continue to develop and grow? That's what exceptional leaders do. That's where gratitude fits. That's where appreciation fits. That's where short-circuiting all of this fight or flight that we're facing every day fits. So our ability to get at that first gap to help people know, yes, you do still belong, is super important.
What a powerful way of putting it, that gap of focusing on who I am, not what I do. If anything, I'm a big advocate, David, for regular meetings for managers to have with their employees,
Mhm.
one-on-ones, and prioritizing it. In many instances, they find reasons and excuses for not doing that.
Mhm.
And the ones that do it have to be really pushed to move the conversation beyond just what did you do and this is what you need to do next.
Right.
Because then it feels soft. And when it feels soft, we feel like maybe that's what people should talk about at happy hour or whatever else,
Yeah.
not in the one-on-one. What I'm hearing from you is that rather than just focusing on what the person does, the great leaders are the ones who are focusing on who I am and spending time getting to know that. It's not just the results that I'm producing.
Exactly. They're trying to figure out, like, what's your story? And I hate to mention the pandemic, but I think it's instructive at times. When we realized the pandemic was real, what did we do? What did leaders do? Because I talked to them during this time, and they said, we have no playbook. We're just being human as we're leading. And what did that mean? They called all their people. And what did they say? They said, hey, I care about you. Are you safe? What's your situation? How are you staying safe? Let's talk just a little bit about how things are going to work at work right now. Like, we have the capability, we've done it before, but it's time to bring that back. Everybody has an I Want song. We need them to sing a few bars. And one leader I know, in her team meetings, at the start of every meeting, she asks someone on her team to talk about their journey. It's as simple as that. 5 minutes, they can cover whatever they want, but what you get out of that is an I Want song. You get beautiful music, you understand their story. And leaders can do that too in one-on-ones. We just have to ask, help me. I'm asking everybody some of these questions around, like, what path do you want to be on here? How do you see yourself? What's important to you in life? We can ask those questions. And then I don't know if you want me to talk about the concept of soft here now, Mahan, or not, but we got to talk about it today because we have to stop calling soft skills soft.
I would love to go into that. I want to mention a couple of things before we do, David. First of all, I think the pandemic is a good example in that even the data from Gallup engagement and others showed an uptick, in part because people felt that for the first time, their manager, their executives cared about them as a person,
Right.
not just someone producing results. So it is a relevant example for us to think about. And I believe as a result of the changes we're going through in the workforce, most specifically in knowledge work as a result of exponential technologies like AI, there's as much anxiety, if not more, that people are feeling. Therefore, we need to use some of those muscles that we developed during the pandemic in the empathy and getting to know people's stories, getting to connect with them as individuals. I think that is critical. Now, you mentioned that soft skills aren't soft, and I would totally agree with you. However, it's incredible, David, when I work with organizations and leadership teams, when I encourage them to start, for example, with some of the conversations that you were mentioning, they
Mm-hmm.
feel like there is something odd. That's a Mahan thing. And sometimes they even joke because Mahan is here. We have to. So, why should we see this as something that actually produces business results?
Yeah. Maybe we can work on this together, Mahan, because it is definitely a huge challenge. And I've experienced that as well. They're like, oh, David's here. So now
Yes.
we're gonna talk about our feelings and our emotions as well. But I think what's different, what gives me hope, I feel like we need to put it in the context of AI and what's happening with AI today. And I know one of your other podcast guests talked about this whole idea of AI is going to become commoditized in many cases. So if that is indeed the case, then what does that mean for what AI can't do? So my belief is humans who use AI will replace humans who don't use AI. I think what we're not talking about is this idea of leaders who lead humanly are going to replace those who don't lead humanly. That is absolutely my belief. So I've been thinking about the framing of this. So let me give you, how about if I give you a couple options, Mahan, here on some framing and you give me some feedback. So here's another framing. Leaders who use AI will replace leaders who don't. Second part. And leaders who lead with humanity will replace leaders who use AI. That's one option. Let me give you my second. My second is AI will replace tasks. Humanity will replace leaders? Give me some feedback here.
I love the framing. I have to tell you, the second version of it is very memorable. With all of the AI books I've read and the conversations I've had with all these brilliant people, in essence, they very much say the same thing, that first of all, many of these tasks will be replaced by AI, and secondarily, the managerial tracking of tasks, AI will be able to do a heck of a lot better.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of things that managers have traditionally done. AI will be able to do all of those things a lot better. It will remember everything. It will be able to give subtle coaching where needed. What it won't be able to do is exactly what you mentioned, that humanity. It won't be able to connect to the humanity of the other individual. Going back to another point that you had made about gratitude and even those post-it notes, David, I think it's beautiful because every time I interact with ChatGPT and any of these platforms, I'm sure you've done it as well. It tells me how brilliant I am, how wonderful I am. I don't
Mhm.
save any of those, right? It's not meaningful to me. It can tell me I'm the smartest person in the world. It's not meaningful to me. But if a friend, if a human sends me a note, email, written, doesn't matter, and says, Mahan, that was special, that means a lot to me. So, what you just described is that difference
Mhm.
in that AI cannot give that human connection to us. It can take away all the tasks, and therefore leaders need to learn how to use it to do that. But they then need to be able to double up on that humanity. So I love the way you described it and could not agree with you more.
You're exactly right here. And there's some research that shows that AI in some ways can be empathetic, for example. But look, the research has also shown we as humans know when it's performative. Like Steve and I have been together 25 years. He knows when I'm frustrated or angry. He knows what to say to deal with my emotional content. And I know when it's performative versus when he's really with me listening. We all know that. I believe these hard first skills that we talked about, this is our AI moat. And they become even more important as AI continues to grow and rise and do more and more.
Any thoughts with respect to how to unlock human potential in addition to doubling up on your humanity, David?
So I think to answer that question, like the other two gaps here of good leaders, provide some clues and cues here as to how we do this. So we've already talked about gap one. Employees don't feel like they're seen as people, that you see what I do, you don't see who I am. So that's one. The second gap is around feeling heard. So 19% under good leaders feel heard. Now, here's the thing. When leaders often hear this, my employees don't feel heard, what do they think? They think, I need to listen better. That is not the problem here. You can't hear what people won't say. And people won't say what feels risky. So this is not about, am I listening? This is all about, have you made it safe enough for people to tell you the truth? And the question they're really asking here around this feeling heard is, will I be okay? So that's the second gap. And then the third is around reaching my full potential. So 14%. This is the lowest absolute of all of the dimensions. And so the questions employees are really asking here, is there a future here? Is the discretionary effort worth it? This is an investment commitment kinds of questions. And it's a retention crisis in many cases in plain sight. And of course, good people care about their people, but caring isn't enough if you don't connect the strategy of the organization and where it's going to the individual growth opportunities. for this person so that they know that they have a future because you're thinking about their growth and their development. So good leaders might say, here's our strategy, here's what we need to do to execute. Exceptional leaders will say, here's where we're going, here's why it matters, and here's how it creates opportunity for you specifically that transforms uncertainty from a threat to a real path forward.
Now, that takes a lot of effort, David. In your experience, what are some leaders that you believe have done this well and how it shows results in their team and organization?
So you alluded to this a little bit earlier. So often our check-ins are all about work. But what if instead we did regular sort of emotional, career-focused check-ins with our people, where if we didn't already know their song, we were learning their song. We're still checking in about their work, but we're talking with them about how their work is contributing to their growth. What are they seeing? How are they feeling? These are very different kinds of conversations. And yes, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of intentionality, but that's the heart work part here that I know to be successful, we're going to need to do more of these things. And the data shows those leaders that do that, that fill the gaps that we talked about today, their results are twice the results of good leaders. That's significant. There's a lot of what's in it for me in what we're talking about today.
And by the way, David, as you're mentioning this, I can think specifically of three overstretched, stressed CEOs whose boards can and should do that with them. This is not just a frontline manager doing it with their team members, or a VP doing it with the managers, or a CEO doing it with their VPs. The CEOs also need it.
Absolutely. Hey, it gets lonely at the top. See that all the time. You get surrounded by people who tell you what they think you want to hear, and what you really need are truth tellers around you. But to your point, we also need boards that are empathetic and understanding and are looking at both results and how results get done as well. It's so interesting. So many compensation committees today now are compensation and leadership development. I don't love the leadership development term. I'd love it to be risk management instead. But comp committees now on boards are looking at both how results get, what the results are, and how the results get done as well. I think that's super smart. Just one of the many things boards are doing to be thinking about this topic as well.
Now, as we do this, you also mentioned the perspective passport to force some outside in thinking.
That's where you need mirrors to be held up in front of you. So it could be a 360, it could be an executive coach you're working with, it could be skip level data. It's like, where's the data? And not just the employee engagement data, because like it'd be great to have leading indicators, not just lagging indicators that corroborate what I think I know. And then also just look yourself in the mirror and realize chances are you're overstating. You're more confident than you may think. And that it takes courage to say and bravery. But I think it's an important first step to being able to realize and think about, okay, what do I really do well here that I need to continue my superpowers? And where is the biggest opportunity or two? Where are the two big blind spots that I have? These good leaders that we talked about in the research, there are three blind spots there. I bet leaders listening today could say, you know what? That not feeling heard is a blind spot I have. I'm not creating a safe environment for myself. So hopefully that's at least a start, a way to think about it.
That's a great way to approach it. And as you mentioned, there are tools, there are systems. The first part of it, in my view, is you are not there yet. Having a level of growth mindset with
Mm-hmm.
respect to any of these ideas that we're mentioning, don't assume that people are already giving you the kind of feedback that you need to get. You're not there yet. Find ways to get the feedback, to be able to look in the mirror, to get different perspectives. Now, one other thing I wanted to touch on, David, is that you argue flexibility is the new currency. In some instances, I've seen organizations actually go in the other direction. So help you understand why you see it as the new currency and whether you think this is where we are headed in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. But if I may, Mahan, I just made a note. Back to just the feedback for 1 minute, and then I'll answer your question. I think one thing everyone can do tomorrow is can ask everyone on their team, give me one thing I do well, one thing I could do even better, and give me one piece of advice. And if you generalize it in the sense that you say, hey, I'm asking everybody, I'm wanting to be better, I'm really listening here. All I'm going to do is you give me this info is I'm going to listen. The piece that's usually the most important is the third, the piece of advice. I wanted to share that as I was just processing and thinking even more about your really excellent question.
That is outstanding. And no matter how much feedback you think you're getting, do that. And the way you respond after people give that determines the culture of the organization from there on out. Because I imagine there's going to be feedback that you will see as relevant, feedback that you would see as not relevant, feedback that you might take personally is because the person wanted a raise and they didn't get the raise or
Right.
whatever.
Yep.
The response to the general feedback determines the culture of the organization. And whether people like turtles pull that head in the shell and never stick it out again, or they will say, you know what, Mahan or David might not agree with me, but is
Mm-hmm.
at least willing to and wanting to get the feedback. So I love what you mentioned. It's casual, it's not a major survey. The response to it becomes also a critical part of the
Yes.
culture.
Yes. I love that you mentioned that because one of the big mistakes, the biggest mistakes that leaders make is they ask for feedback and then they don't do anything with it. They don't close the loop with people. And what that says to people is when you ask in the future, you really don't care. And when you ask in the future, I'm going to be less willing, not probably not going to feel as safe or want to share feedback with you because you're not doing anything about it. That gets at that second gap, right? The folks want to feel heard, and it's not about listening. That's about creating safety. So people tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, but how can we get our people to tell us what we really need to hear?
Outstanding. Now, we were going to talk about flexibility being the new currency. I wanted to get some of your thoughts on that,
Sure.
David.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're thinking about all the return to work and that theme and what's happening, I think here's where managers need to play a role in the spirit of understanding their people and their story. Of course, we need to follow the rules of our organization, if you will. At the same time, part of the reason why we're people leaders and our organizations have hired us is to, where it makes sense, be flexible when it comes to what our people need. And that's what I meant by this idea of the flexibility in many cases is the new currency. Do we understand our people and what they need? Gentleman on my team, for example, his youngest is in basketball right now. It's at 3:30 after school. Now his hours are typical hours, but I know that about him. I know that's important. So every day, just about 3:30, I make sure I'm not calling him. We try not to have meetings so he can go home and so he can go to school and watch his son play basketball. Now, that's the kind of flexibility that is important. And I know he cares about it. I care about him, and I want him to go to those basketball games.
That is a beautiful way of putting it, David. And I had an amazing boss who was the COO of Dale Carnegie. We were spending all of our time on the road traveling nonstop. So he knew when we were home, it would be important for us to have a chance to spend time with our families. And therefore, the way he dealt with us, the way he communicated with us, the flexibility he gave us made us more committed to the work we were doing as well. So when you're talking about flexibility, it goes back to that humanity and genuine listening where you know what matters to that person, what their story is. So you give them the kind of flexibility they want. It's individualized for the person, it's not generalized.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is also not transactional. It is relational, to your point, and that every person on your team may require a different kind of flexibility because of what they care about. And this goes back to, do you know the story of everybody on your team and what's most important to them? So one of the questions I always ask my team, I want to know what makes you most content. Happy's not quite the right word. It's like content. I want to know that because I want that for you, and where I can help steer you in that direction, where I can help deliver that for you. We can deliver that, we can work on that together. The better off we're all going to be. And it feels great. When Kyle goes to his son's basketball game, makes me feel great. I'm so glad. Having two girls, I know what it's like. You know what it's like to be a parent and to be proud and wanting to be there for your kids' defining moments, that quality time. I get it. I want that for him. And I believe he trusts me more. That's not why I do it, but that there's a significant amount of trust and loyalty built up there.
Where do you feel you need to focus most effort for your own growth?
Yeah, great question. I mentioned earlier, Abby got her driving permit. So Mahan, Steve and I talked about who's going to be the parent who teaches her how to drive. So we decided I would be the one. So what does every parent do? I took her to an empty parking lot with no cars, like no danger around us, just all sorts of nerves. And she was feeling great and super confident. I was feeling stressed. And so she started to drive. And Mahan, what did I do? I grabbed the door handle. And what did she do? She froze. And then I took a big inhale. And what did she do? She stopped. And I thought to myself, David, like, this is what leaders do to their people. Like, your reaction, what you are doing is causing her fight or flight. So, Mahan, my learning, what I'm continuing to work on is managing my own emotions. And the thing that I realized too is in that car, I had to remind myself, I have agency. We have agency. We have a license to operate. We have choices. As leaders, we make choices every day. And when I realized what I was doing to her, what leaders do to their teams, the same thing, I thought to myself, David, stop, take a breath and be that flight attendant. And so I processed quickly my emotions, that hijack of my amygdala. I worked through it. My prefrontal cortex, my Wi-Fi went right back on. And sure enough, what happened next? She started driving. So for me, it's all about just continuing to be aware of, manage my emotions. Because early on, too, one other thing here, like early on, like the younger version of me would bat emotions away. Like they were bad. I only let myself feel the good, right? The good emotions. And then I realized there's such information inside emotions, right? There's data, and then there's our emotions that give us insights into ourself. And there's our intuition, which is also data, by the way. In many cases, it's a different kind of data. And so how can I use my emotions to help me lead and lead a much more content kind of life?
What a beautiful example and what a beautiful point to make, David. And I think it becomes even more important as we go through this exponential change, AI, and its impact on us. I love Yuval Harari's writing on this. And one of the things he talks about now, he's a little more pessimistic on where we are
Mm.
headed with AI
Mhm.
than I would be. But Yuval talks about the fact that we need to become a lot more aware of our senses and our emotions in order to be able to control ourselves as opposed to AI getting to know us and our emotions.
Mhm.
And he talks about the importance of that in us being able to thrive in a world where AIs will get to know us and will try to manipulate us. But part of the point that you're making that, in my view, aligns well with this is that for us to become a better version of ourselves, we need to get to know our emotions. We need to be able to acknowledge them and then be able to channel them. What a beautiful way of making ourselves a better version of us as parents and as leaders for others as well. I love that, David. For the audience to follow your work, to find your book, where would you send them to?
You bet. So The Heart Work of Modern Leadership, available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. For more on the book, go to thegrossmanGroup.co/books. Or if you want to reach out to me, it's David@thegrossmangroup.co.
What a joy and pleasure it's been, David, for this conversation on the hard work of modern leadership, 6 differentiators of exceptional leaders. Thank you so much, David Grossman.
Mahan, thank you. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.